The purpose of formative evaluation is to set up a system for revising the instruction based on how it works with real learners. Rather than being a one-time activity, it's most effective when it's done throughout the development process. The earlier we identify problems in the instruction, the easier and cheaper it is to correct them. Notice that the Design and Conduct Formative Evaluation of Instruction box in the model has arrows that lead back to all of the design and development activities. When you find something that needs fixing, you should go back to whatever step in the model will take care of the problem. The techniques of formative evaluation, as described in Dick, Carey, and Carey, are expert review, one-on-one, small group, and field trial. The terminology was created for classroom-type instruction, so it is sometimes necessary to be flexible in how the phases are defined for other media or strategies. For the formative evaluation assignment in this course, you are required to perform the following techniques: at least one expert review, and then 2 of the 3 other techniques, one-on-one, small group, or field trial. Ideally, the design team will conduct all 4 techniques during a development effort. It's particularly important if the instructional unit will be used many times for many learners. The formative evaluation of a course with a smaller scope would have to balance the time and expense of doing all the phases against the value received. Now we'll look at each of the phases in detail. The expert review is usually the first step in the formative evaluation process. The main purpose is to make sure the instruction is accurate and appropriate. When you have the materials in a first draft form, you should give it to a subject matter expert for review. This SME should not be the one you've been using in the analysis process. You need a fresh perspective. You may want to use 2 experts. The first is someone who knows the subject well. This expert should look at the materials to make sure all the factual statements are correct and up to date. The second optional expert is someone who knows the target population well. This one should look at whether the presentation, language, illustrations, etc. are appropriate for the audience. If you already know the target population, or if the subject matter expert is also an expert on the audience, this second review might not be necessary. One word of warning: the SME is likely to make comments about the strategies you have used and suggest additional content. Accept these comments with care. Don't, for example, add a section on the history of computers because this SME thinks it's nice to have. Your analysis is your guide for content and strategies. The one-on-one evaluation is the first time you expose the instruction to a real learner. It's very important to use members of the target population in the evaluations from here on. This phase of review is where you will catch the most obvious problems, like typos, omission of content, confusing instructions, etc. Ask one learner to help you with the development of your unit. You can do this with a part of the unit or the whole thing. Sit down with the learner and have her go through it as a student. Watch over her shoulder and encourage her to talk about what she is thinking. Get as much interaction as you can. If you see a hesitation, ask if there is something she didn't understand, or if something could be worded better, or whatever. Either have a recorder running, video or audio, or take good notes. Encourage the learner to write comments in the margins or on a separate paper. You will get a rough idea of the time required, but realize that this process will take longer than the real course will. Do as many one-on-one evaluations as you feel are useful. The text recommends at least 3 evaluators at this stage, 1 at a time, but often you'll get enough information after 1 or 2. Stop when you no longer get a useful amount of changes. The next phase of the formative evaluation is the small group review. The 2 purposes for this phase are to check the effect of the changes you made in the first phases, and to determine whether the learner can go through the lesson without intervention from the developer. Again, use members of the actual target population. The learners you used for the one-on-one phase are no longer in your target population because they have received instruction. Administer the instruction as it was designed to be used. Let the learners know that they are evaluating the material and that any problems are probably because of the materials, not themselves. Encourage them to write notes on the materials. For this phase of the evaluation, the evaluator should intervene as little as possible. For an instructor-led course, observe quietly from the back of the room. If it's a self-administered unit, sit somewhere in the room to observe, but, as Robert Mager says, try to be a chair. In any case, don't intervene unless everything falls completely apart. The text recommends the use of 8 to 20 participants in the small group tryout. As with the one-to-one review, you may not have that many learners to work with. For the purposes of this course, 2 or 3 learners is enough for the small group evaluation of your project. Part of the small group evaluation is to conduct a debriefing exercise, including some or all of the participants. Ask questions like these to get learner opinions on the instruction. Here are some more questions to ask. Based on the results of the review, the questionnaires, and interviews, make the changes that are required. It's not necessary to follow all of the recommendations of the learners. Keep your design and strategies in mind when evaluating the data. For the field trial, the situation should be the actual setting in which the unit will be used. If it's instructor-led, the developer should not be the instructor. The developer should observe as unobtrusively as possible. This is where those two-way mirrors come in handy. For self-paced material, this phase may be no different from the small group phase. If so, it can be skipped, since the small group test is actually also a field test. The formative evaluation plan consists of these sections. It's very similar to a proposal for a research study. Write this as a professional document that's intended to convince someone that it's worthwhile to spend the time and money on doing this, rather than just releasing the material without testing. Include the actual protocols for each phase, as well as any instruments, such as questionnaires or tests. Do not include the materials in the plan document. The appendices will include the overall formative evaluation plan, the specific formative evaluation protocols, each one separately, and copies of any survey or assessment instruments you will use. The formative evaluation report is an extension of the plan. Add 2 sections, results and discussion. What data was gathered and what did it mean? And recommendations, what you would or did change in the materials as a result of the evaluations. For this course, it's not necessary to actually make a revision of the materials. Just indicate in the recommendations section what changes you would make. See the Formative Evaluation Report format in the Instructional Design Resources page of the WebCT site for more details on the plan and report. This has been a brief overview of the formative evaluation process. In practice, this is the phase of the systematic design of instruction that is most often left out. For a small unit that's only going to be used for a short time, it is reasonable to make an informal, shortened formative evaluation. However, for larger projects that will be used many times, a full formative evaluation will help you be confident that your instructional unit will work as intended from the time it's released, saving time and money and your reputation as an instructional designer.